This is a production of China Central Television America.
Discrimination against women in the workplace, in politics, and even in their own communities is deep-rooted in history. But when it comes to the present, it's still very real for millions of women around the world. This week, we'll meet women determined to change that once and for all. They want to empower all women to reach their full potential. I'm Mike Walter in Los Angeles. Let's take it full frame. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that women make up 46% of the total labor force in the United States. But the playing field is far from level for women in the workplace around the world. Here in the U.S., women still earn only 78 cents for every dollar earned by their male colleagues. And in women in the top-level executive and managerial positions, they earn less than 72% of what men in those same positions make. And the statistics are not much different on a global scale. In fact, 4 in 10 businesses worldwide have no women in senior management positions. Globally, women earn less than men in 99% of all occupations. But as full-frame contributor Sandra Hughes reports, equal pay is not the only challenge women are grappling with in the workplace today.
So I was thinking which ones I'm going to order. Oh, great. Which pieces.
Trey Hazlett owns a lingerie store in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I want to get that.
That's stunning.
That's beautiful. Like, I like the way the lace hangs.
Didem Bash Bilge owns a medical tourism company in Istanbul.
What's your eye sign? Are you minus or plus?
And Maki Abe owns a consulting business in Tokyo.
そのフィールドを作っておきたい女性にとってっていうふうには強く思いました。
These working moms are continents apart, but say they share a common problem: gender bias in the workplace.
When you're fighting for your position, you give up something. It's not always equal.
実際的には女性っていうのはまだまだ子供を産んで育ててビジネスで活躍するというような考えっていうのは家庭に入るというような風潮っていうのがはっきりは言いませんけれども色濃く残ってるんじゃないかなというふうに思ってて。
I have 5 for 20 panties right here. In most people's eyes, they feel that a man would be more successful in different, with different businesses.
These are sentiments heard around the world, even in 2014.
Actually, what the literature calls it now is second-generation gender bias. So it's still present, but it's just much more subtle than it was for, say, our generation, where we were sort of really cutting the path for women in the workplace.
Trey Hazlett says to grow her business, she's had to fight for what many men take for granted.
With me, it's like, where is the money?
She was repeatedly turned down when she sought lines of credit for her lingerie boutique. And about that myth of having it all, the balancing act of motherhood and career is never perfect, according to Hazlett.
Karen, your food is ready.
And she's letting her daughter in on the secret.
I don't teach my daughter that everything is like a candy land. I try to be realistic with her.
The reality for many women around the globe is that the corporate world doesn't give them the flexibility they need to raise a family. So millions of women have become entrepreneurs out of necessity. In just the developing world, a 2010 study found between 8 and 10 million businesses owned by women. In the United States, women-owned businesses are growing at twice the rate of other businesses. But the U.S. isn't leading the way for gender equity.
Actually, the Nordic countries are doing the best, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. They've passed policies that have mandated that there should be a certain percentage of women in, particularly at the board level of organizations, and also legislation with respect to pay.
Research shows women use their earnings to buy goods and services that improve their family's welfare and benefit the overall economy. More women in the workplace is a goal of the Japanese Prime Minister. But in Tokyo, Maki Abe says long-held traditions influence senior management.
男性はバリバリ仕事をして家庭を支える、女性は家を守るって、そういうのがまだ概念とある人たちが上のに行っているので、その意識っていうのはやっぱり強くあって、ただそれを打開していくにはやはり女性自身の一番意識改革っていうのが求められているとは思うので。
In Turkey, that's what Didem Baş Bilge has done. She says running a business often means embracing a non-traditional role.
You organize everything from A to Z, so you sometimes fight with taxi drivers, sometimes you fight with the hotels, so you become like bossy, and I'm like a small skinny girl is shouting here and there in order to make things proper.
The lack of available daycare for working moms forced her to start her own daycare center and move her business into the same building.
I have a kindergarten and a baby and a medical tourism company.
These women and more around the globe are hearing the same message. If women want gender equity in the boardroom and beyond, they need to make it happen. Because even in the most progressive countries, they say it's still a man's world. For Full Frame, this is Sandra Hughes in Los Angeles.
The research on global gender inequality shows that no country has been able to completely close the gender gap for women in the workplace. The United Nations has a gender inequality index. In 2013, the index showed that although gender inequality varies tremendously across countries, the losses in achievement due to gender inequality range from 5 to 75% worldwide. And the 2013 Global Gender Report once again reported that despite the increased participation of women in higher education and the overall workforce, women's presence in economic leadership positions is still quite limited. So despite all the progress made by women in shattering the glass ceiling in recent decades, how have things really changed, or have they? Joining me now is someone who has a definite answer to that question. She's been named, among other things, the most powerful woman in business, one of the world's 100 most powerful women, and was among the first women to run a Fortune 20 company. Carly Fiorina is one of the world's most recognized business and opinion leaders. She's also the founder of the One Woman Initiative and former chairman of Hewlett-Packard. She now serves as chairman of Good 360, the world's largest product philanthropy organization. We want to welcome you to Full Frame. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You said when you were named the chair at Hewlett-Packard back in 1999, you were kind of surprised that everyone focused on the fact that you were a woman. If you were named today, would it change much? I mean, has the landscape changed at all, or is it still, if you're a woman CEO, people are looking at you differently?
Well, I think things have changed. For the 6 years that I served as chairman and CEO of Hewlett-Packard, my gender was a constant source of discussion and commentary. On the other hand, today's women CEOs, and thankfully there are far more of them, Mary Barra, as an example, there was about 1 day of news coverage about her gender, and then it went on to other things. So there has been progress, and there are more female CEOs, certainly. And yet, only 3% of the Fortune 500 are led by women. So we have a lot of progress left to make.
How much did that get on your nerves?
Well, you know, it's interesting because in many ways, women still are not given the presumption of competence that men are given. And so the burden of proof always rests with a woman to prove that she can do the job. And when I came into Hewlett Packard, honestly, I really thought that people would be more focused on the trouble that this legendary company was in, and it was in a great deal of trouble. I was hired as a transformational leader. I thought people would focus on the fact that I came from outside the industry, perhaps, or I was the first outsider, or I was the first non-engineer. But people really fixated on my gender, and it was, in retrospect, of course, entirely predictable. I was the first, although I hadn't predicted it because I had so long ago stopped thinking about myself as a woman in business and thought about myself as a business leader who happened to be a woman.
You talked about business leader. Casey Stengel, the old manager of the New York Yankees, said the secret to leadership is to make sure that the part of the team that hates you is kept away from the part of the team that's still undecided. I guess as a leader coming in and having to deal with not just that kind of stuff, the underlying stuff, but also the woman thing, perhaps maybe men looking at you and saying, well, you know, she's telling me what to do. Is there still a lot of that going on in the business industry, or has it changed, do you think?
Well, look, I think it's still undeniably different for women. Women are scrutinized differently, caricatured differently, criticized differently. And yet it's also true that the role of a leader is to lead, despite what people are saying about you. The role of a leader is to make sure that those people in the organization who embrace change help proselytize change among those who are skeptical, and that a leader also has to identify those people who really don't want to change no matter what. That's true for a man, and it's true for a woman.
There's also the other piece of this, which is if you're a CEO, you have to deal with the people beneath you, and as you said, trying to engender change. But you also have to deal with the board, and it doesn't seem like there's these boards are dominated by a lot of women who are really progressive. They seem like they're old school, a lot of good old boys, that kind of thing. I mean, it's tough for a woman to navigate both up and down, right?
Well, look, if you look at this data, what you'll see is in this country, which has made more progress on gender equality in business than any other country on earth, I think it's fair to say. But it's also true that only 16% of corporate officers and board members are women. And that number hasn't budged in a decade. And I think the reason for that is because boardrooms are pretty clubby affairs, and people actually in positions of risk and liability, which a board position is, tend to feel more comfortable with people like themselves. That's human nature. It doesn't make people bad, but it's human nature to feel more comfortable with someone like you, and in particular to feel more comfortable with someone you've known a long time. And so a woman frequently is perceived as riskier. I don't know them. And yet the data says women are frequently less risky. For example, I also chair an organization called Opportunity International. We lift women and their families out of poverty through microfinance. It turns out that women are far better credit risks than men, and so most of our clients are women. It turns out there have been a lot of studies made that women tend to be better problem solvers in many cases.
You started out a few years back in this business, in the business world. And probably it was pretty sexist back then. There's sexual harassment. I mean, there was...
Yeah. I started in 1980. My first business meeting with a client was in a strip club, because that's where the client wanted to test me and meet me.
I guess that says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, my first boss, when I became a manager for the first time, introduced me to my team as a token bimbo. So I hope things have gotten better for women.
We'll talk about that, because that's back then. And people think the arc's pretty good and that we've gotten to where we are today. But still, a woman gets in a leadership position like yours, and then people whisper behind the scenes, oh, she's kind of pushy, or she's stuff that they wouldn't say about a guy, right? I mean, that's still there.
Of course it's still there. A woman is described as pushy, or a word that starts with a B.
Yes.
A man is described as assertive, decisive. But that's not as bad as the global reality. Women are the most subjugated people on the planet. 70% of the people living on less than $2 a day are women. Women are sold into sex slavery. Female lives are aborted by the millions simply because they're female. This is an outrage. And so, yes, it's terrible that women are talked about. And yes, it's a tragedy that only 16% of corporate officers and board members are women. But the bigger tragedy is the amount of human potential that is being wasted, the lives that are being destroyed simply because they're women. And the thing is now, the data is so clear. This is dumb. It's bad business. It's bad policy. If you want to solve problems and improve the state of the world, women need to be engaged. It's in everyone's interest to engage women more. You know, I think we're at the point now where you don't legislate a change in attitude. I think we're at the point now where instead of merely talking about this as a matter of justice or equity or inclusion or diversity, although it is all those things, we need to now speak about it in terms of enlightened self-interest. It is in every organization's self-interest to tap all of the potential they have. It is in every nation's interest to tap 50% of their human potential. Women represent half the world, half the nation. Goodness me, we have a lot of problems and a lot of opportunities, and we are wasting the potential of women to help solve them.
But one of the other things that I think women bring to the table is perhaps, you know, a sensitivity, an ability to listen, perhaps, to understand another person's point of view. Men tend to come in and they bluster and that sort of thing. And I think in the political realm, I know a guy who used to work for one of the female senators, and he said that she always would get in and she could somehow bring the different sides together. So they do bring different skill sets than men have in many regards.
Well, I think, look, I think command and control, while it is a traditional style of leadership, is not very effective anymore, if it ever was. And it's not effective because our problems are very complex, the pace of change is accelerating, and nobody is smart enough to have all the answers. Women tend to go first to collaboration, not competition. And in a complex, fast-paced environment, collaboration is actually extremely useful skill because it brings lots of perspectives and points of view to the table. I think a good leader, male or female, a good leader is empathetic as well as demanding. And I think sometimes women bring that empathy and that ability to listen a little bit more naturally.
Mm-hmm. In a global sense, where do you think America stands in terms of opportunities for women?
Well, I think we have come a very long way from where we were even 20 years ago. I believe this is a nation where more people from more places in more circumstances have been able to fulfill their potential, and I believe that is true for women as well. So I think this is, honestly, the greatest country on the face of the earth because so many people are enabled to fulfill their potential. I started out as a secretary. I was a law school dropout. I guarantee you, it is only in the United States of America, still to this day, that a secretary could become a chief executive of the largest technology company in the world. And so while we have a very long way to go, we also, I think, have demonstrated how much economic growth women's participation in the economy can create. So I'm proud of the example we set in the world, and I acknowledge that we also have a ways to go.
You started as that secretary, and I know from reading about you that there was somebody in the office that took an interest in you.
Yes,
and
two men.
Yeah.
Two men.
How much did that mentoring help in your trajectory?
Huge. In fact, I tell this story often. Those two gentlemen, when they came to my desk and said, "We've been watching you. We think you can do more than type and file," they changed my life. Fundamentally, they put me on a path towards business, which I had never even considered. But more than that, that was my first demonstration of real leadership. They saw potential in me, and because they did, I saw possibilities in myself. And so I learned that leadership isn't about who has position or title or the corner office. leadership is about seeing potential in other people and helping people unlock potential. Because if you can find potential in other people, you can see possibilities in whatever the problem or the circumstances that you're in.
Okay, so we have this book here, and it's called Tough Choices, and there just happens to be this other woman out with another book that also has choices in it. You may have heard of her. Her name's Hillary Clinton. She stole that undoubtedly from you. You ought to talk to her about that.
Well, this was published in 2006, so it was a long time
You're way
ago.
ahead of her. But she must like something about you because she chose choices in her title. There's been a lot of speculation that she may run for president of the United States. Do you think America's ready for a woman president, or long overdue for a woman's president, perhaps?
I think Americans are clearly ready for a woman president. Now, whether that will be Hillary Clinton or not, who knows? But the polling suggests that not only are Americans ready for a woman president, but they're excited about a woman president. So, yes, I think America's ready.
Do you think they'll stop talking about her hair and her pantsuits and all
No,
of that?
probably not.
No?
Probably not.
They haven't gone that
But
far.
you know, one of the things I've learned in the course of my life is people say all kinds of things about you. And you can let what they say about you define you, or you can let your own choices, your own decisions, your own results, and your own beliefs define you. And I think allowing your own choices and beliefs to define you is far better than other people's words.
You mentioned your own choices. So how about your own choices? Where do you see yourself as we move forward in life? I know you're very active right now in philanthropy, but you also dipped your toe in the water politically. What fascinates you? What interests you? Where do you see yourself
Well, you know,
going?
I think I will remain very actively engaged in both politics and policy. And the reason for that is because A, it matters and it's important. Remember, I like tough challenges. But B, in this country, ours was intended to be a citizen government. That's how we were founded. It's how our government has been designed. And I frankly think that our political process has, in part, become so dysfunctional because we have professional politicians, people who've done nothing but run for office. And the truth is, you learn a lot in the private sector or in the not-for-profit sector that can be brought to politics. And we used to be a nation where people would move routinely in and out of public service. I think we should return to that, actually.
I want to ask you one final question. If there's a young girl out there watching you and saying, you know, maybe I'd like to follow in her footsteps, you know, maybe I want to be a CEO, maybe I want to go into politics, maybe I want to be president, what advice would you give her, and what tips might you give her in terms of navigating this type of terrain that you had to navigate?
Well, I would say first, there is no substitute for hard work, and don't be afraid of the tough challenges. In fact, it's the tough challenges and the tough times that teach you what you're really made of. Secondly, I would say, don't wait for the perfect job. Just get a job, because you'll learn something important in every experience you have if you let yourself learn it. And the truth is, if you do a job really well, whatever that job is, opportunity will knock. And when opportunity knocks, answer the door. And the third thing I would say is, everyone has gifts. Find out what yours are. Find out what you love to do and what you're good at doing. And then put all of your energy into it and define your life for yourself. Don't let someone else define it for you.
Just get going, huh?
Well, among other things.
Yeah. All right, thanks so much. It was great talking to you.
Great to talk to you.
Next, women are taking social media by storm and using technology as a tool for social and economic reform. We'll meet two women at the forefront of that effort in just a moment. It's often said that women are more verbal than men, and recent studies prove that when it comes to social media, women are indeed talking more than their male counterparts. In fact, women now make up 64% of Facebook users, 58% of Twitter users, and a whopping 82% of Pinterest users. So how can social media and technology be used as a tool to empower women worldwide? The two women you're about to meet are using technology to do just that. Yael Swerdlaw is co-founder of the Women's Empowerment Foundation. She created the nonprofit to redefine feminist ideals and help women assume greater leadership roles in media and politics. And Patricia Dow the managing director of Girls in Tech Los Angeles, which works to empower, educate, and inspire girls and women to pursue careers in technology. And I want to welcome both of you to the broadcast. Let's start with your foundation. What prompted you to start it?
Well, I was approached by my co-founder, Ilana Shoshan, who is an Israeli-American activist, and she's a former Miss Israel, actually, and she was elected Miss Israel of all time in 2010 for her work with women empowerment in Israel, and decided that it was very, very important for women to be able to understand that they do not have any limitations whatsoever. So Ilana's vision was to change the way women think of themselves, as opposed to just thinking that they have to shoot for the corner office and then like feel guilty being there or things like that. So we decided to address the history of feminism and how it had been rebranded to be something bad. So we decided to address that, and we decided to talk about the way women dress and just really approach things that people were sort of skirting around at the time. So
how was it rebranded that it was bad, do you think?
Over the years, it was rebranded after, for example, the Anita Hill hearings in 1991. The newspapers were told that they needed to start running more feminine-oriented stories versus feminist-oriented because women were getting too powerful, and they wanted to have women concentrate on fashion and society and Dear Abby and recipes. They were very, very nervous about women taking political control over their own lives, their own bodies, all of that.
Interesting. Patricia, I'm not going to leave you out. I'm coming to you now.
She knows more than me anyway.
Let's talk about some of the because I know it's going to come up. STEM and STEAM, is that right? What are they, and how do they factor into all of this?
Yeah, so STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And STEAM, you just add the A in, and that means art, really. And so there's a really great big movement within girls' education and women empowerment around STEM, and really encouraging them to go into these fields, right? Because historically, STEM and technology was meant for men, right? Hard skills were valued, like coding and engineering. And these days, I mean, technology isn't just a field, right? It's part of everything that we do. So it's opened up a lot more opportunities for women. That doesn't mean that women can't code or engineer, right? But if you can't do those type of things, which I can't, it gives a lot of opportunities for women to take roles, maybe marketing roles within tech organizations and be part of it. Right now in Silicon Valley, actually, 6 out of the top 10 companies there are led by women CMOs, which is great because marketing is playing a really good factor or big factor in a lot of these tech companies today.
How does that change the dynamic within a company? I mean, obviously having that kind of empowerment and having women in these kind of lead roles, how do you think that changes the face of the company or how the company addresses things, how they deal with things? And Patty, I'll start with you first and we'll move down the couch.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, what used to be seen as soft skills like relationship building, communication, interpersonal skills, those things really didn't fit into the tech world. But now, I mean, they're so important, especially in a collaborative environment where it's not about putting your head down and just coding anymore, right? Those type of things are easy to do with all of the open source type of resources you can to put things together. Now it's all about how do you take this technology, how do you take this robot, how do you take this game and send it out to the public and get consumers to use it. And I think women are really great at doing just that, connecting to the public.
You know, you were talking about Dear Abby and the feminine articles and all of that and trying to reverse that. It's interesting recently, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Lego recently kind of, you saw that?
Saw
okay,
that.
so
it's fantastic.
well, tell me about it. Why don't you tell the viewers what's happened with that?
Well, from what I understand, the Lego has decided to highlight women scientists now. I think women are creating...
Yeah, there's going to be 3 scientists now that they're coming out that are women for change.
Which is just spectacular.
But they got pressure from women's groups to do that.
They got pressure from women's groups, and frankly, it's about time. And so, unfortunately, there's been such a sexualization of women and focusing on, you know, unrealistic body standards and unrealistic beauty standards and unrealistic fashion standards and all of that. And women are utilizing social media more and more to not to fight back, but just to have a voice and say, no, this doesn't work with me. I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to buy that, or I don't want to look like that. The Dove Beauty campaign was a spectacular example, the Real Beauty campaign, of women utilizing social media on YouTube and on Facebook and on Pinterest and Twitter and everything, saying that they don't want to be pigeonholed to look a certain way when it's unrealistic and unhealthy. And that's a fantastic use of social media for empowerment.
And if you look at the Lego example, I mean, the way that they actually voiced their opinion to Lego was through technology. It was through change.org.
Exactly.
Right?
And then when you think about a little girl who's no longer just playing with Barbies, now she's playing with women scientists, it does kind of get into their head, and it makes them think differently too, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, with Girls in Tech, a lot of what we focus on not only is the professional aspect, but it's also the mentoring aspect. And we've partnered with Girl Scouts in LA to do these workshops where we bus in girls from, a lot of them from underserved areas where they can't really get access to these STEM programs. And we'll teach them how to clean up oil spills, how to pull DNA from a banana, how to create a circuit board.
Fantastic.
And it's just so amazing to see how excited they are about it, how engaged they are. And we receive letters from them saying, hey, when I go to college, this is what I want to do.
guys have been at this for a long time, but we've done a really lousy job. So it's about time you take over. But let me ask about like some of the things that, you know, like perhaps maybe might be approached differently by women. Poverty, global security, world peace. How might they approach things differently than a male, would you say?
I think women by nature are more inclusive and more oriented towards team building, and I think that makes a real big difference. There's, you know, conferences all over the world on peace and on climate change and on all the different, in poverty and all of the issues, and there's unfortunately still a preponderance of participants that are men. They're standing up there and saying, well, I think we need to change, do this, we need to do that, and women are far more, I think, creative in their solutions.
That's power from a political standpoint, but you're out there in the business world. You've been an entrepreneur. Is it tougher for a woman to get by? And what do you bring to the table? I know the answer to that, and by your laughter, I know that was a pretty dumb question. But clearly, but you've been able to navigate it, though. Obviously, you've been successful at it. What did you bring to the table? How did you approach it? What separated you from perhaps a lot of women? Probably
She's a rock star.
Yeah.
No, what I mean, so yes, it is I find it a little bit more difficult, but it's obviously not impossible. You know, when I had my own company and it was a tech platform that we launched, it was actually quite intimidating. The building of the platform wasn't, but the bringing it to investors, which were predominantly male.
Oh, yeah.
And finding mentors that would help me, which, you know, in the Silicon Valley space are predominantly male, is a little intimidating at times. And you kind of second guess yourself when you know for a fact that your platform and your business is awesome, right? And so those are kind of the hurdles that realistically are there, whether it's in my head or whether, you know, these men are pushing back I actually think it's both, right? But those were probably the hardest things that I had to go through the process of launching my own company.
So if there's young girls watching this program right now, what would be the thoughts that you'd give them in terms of like some key words of advice heading out there? Let's say they want to be an entrepreneur when they get a little older.
Yeah, I think I think at the end of the day, it's better to fail than to never try at all. Right? And that's the best way for you to build your confidence. And, you know, when it comes to being an entrepreneur or going into the STEM fields or building your own company, it's all about confidence. And once you have that confidence, you can succeed at anything. And it's truly, that is the root of it. And with a lot of these STEM workshops that we do with these young girls, it is about teaching them about the STEM fields and, you know, again, how to pull DNA from the banana, but really it's about them feeling very confident that, oh my gosh, I built this circuit board. You know, I can actually do this, and this is something that I can, you know, do when I get older, right?
Yoel, you get the last word. Your
no.
thoughts? Same thing. If young girls out there watching, it's your chance to empower.
It's my chance to empower. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't succeed.
Yep.
And that's really it. You can do anything and be anyone that you want to be. There's absolutely no limitations whatsoever.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. It's been great fun.
Thank you very much.
Next, there's one global development issue that is being ignored, and our next guest says that empowering women to take control of their own health is the solution. Around the world, a woman dies in childbirth every minute. Every year, maternal deaths leave 1 million children without a mother. And children without mothers are 10 times more likely to die prematurely. Those are all dire numbers, but can anything be done about it? Our next guest thinks so. She believes women should be given access to contraceptives. They should be empowered to make their own decisions about pregnancy and family planning. Just taking those steps can have a far-reaching impact on the well-being of her family and her community. There are currently more than 220 million women in the world who have a need for modern contraceptives and don't have access to them. Giving women control over their reproductive health is not only a woman empowerment issue, but it's a top 5 global health issue that is still being treated as an afterthought. At least that's how Sandra Pelletier sees it. She's an expert in women's reproductive health technologies and an advocate for international gender equality. She's also the author of Saddle Up Your Own White Horse, 5 Principles Every Woman Needs to Know. And she currently serves as the CEO of Woman Care Global, a nonprofit organization that works around the world to provide women with greater access to high-quality and affordable women's health care products. And we want to welcome you to Full Frame. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I just read off those dire statistics, and I know you know them probably inside out, but do you still sit there and think about that and say, it's shocking, and why are we still talking about this?
Staggering. In fact, you know, sometimes I talk to people and they say, are we still having this conversation? It seems like such an old topic. And, you know, my rebuttal is that if we would finally embrace it, you know, and really get under this and create the platform for women to have access, women will make the right decisions. They don't want huge families. They want a quality of life for the children that they do have. So the 230 million women that have an unmet need, 165 million of those are in the poorest countries. So the need exists. I know that there are things that are provocative like HIV, but if we can really address contraceptive choice, so many other problems will be solved.
If those women have that control that you're talking about, which they don't at this stage, right, what does it mean for their life, for their community, for their families, would you say?
I will tell you that it would be so significant. There's so much data and statistics that show that when women are empowered with the dignity of choice, you know, being able to choose when and if and how often they have children, they contribute more to the workforce. They're able to then look at the quality of life of their own children and make sure they have education, so they're contributing factors to these societies. So the economics, there's a true dollar and cents around really empowering women with access to safe, affordable contraception. You know, and we see women who will walk 2 days pregnant with a baby on their back just to be able to have access to get safe contraception.
You know, it's interesting you were saying, you know, we're still having this conversation and the passion that comes out when you're talking about this. Clearly, this is something you care passionately about. Are there days where you just have to look at the small victories, or do you feel like you are making headway, or is it one of those days where you're just like, oh, people, listen to me, you know, or do you go through all of those?
I would tell you that I pretty much, it's a labor of torture for me. I mean, it really is. I will be very honest. Because people say to me, oh, well, we care about global warming. We care about clean water. We care about nutrition. Everybody's moved on to something else. And I say, look, at the beginning and the middle and the end of the day, if there are fewer children that women want, by the way, this isn't force-fed. We're not talking about forcing sterilization on people. We're talking about really allowing them to choose family size. Everything else that people say they care about will be better served. We'll all make more progress. So I will be honest, I never want to come across as angry or frustrated, but
right,
you know, I will.
But
I'm
you're
unsettled.
angry and frustrated.
I am. I'm unsettled about it, and I think I need to be, because I just want to help ignite more people.
You know, Bill, I just did an interview with Bill Gates not too long ago, and he and his wife are obviously throwing money at this issue. You see other philanthropists who are getting involved, and yet we're still kind of right where we're at. Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think it's a number of reasons. I do think that there needs to be better metrics and better measurement around philanthropy and nonprofit. I think we need to really look at where the base is in a lot of these countries, and we need to put real ways to research and evaluate our progress. And we need to do it in a more private sector way. I do think around sexual and reproductive health, we need to get a lot more focused on showing our wins and sharing them with the world so people will think we're not just throwing good money after bad. So, and I do think the Gates Foundation is really insisting that the metrics are more intense, and I think it's a step in the right
So
direction.
if we're looking at the standings and the wins, if we're going to use sports metaphors,
Yep.
where do you look and see wins right now?
So right now we see a very big win in a program that we call MAX. It's Maximizing Provider Performance. So we go into markets and we actually collect data from providers and say, are you giving a woman choice? And if you're not, why is that? Were you only trained in one method? Were the money that was supposed to be spent on contraception spent on drugs or weapons? What are the real reasons? And then we do real-time interventions. So in places like Kenya and South Africa, we're actually not only seeing that the providers are really engaged, but we're seeing true measurable change for the women.
Okay, I looked on your website. Woman Care Global's business model is an unusual one for a nonprofit. It's how you do your product sales and how you do things that is very unique and very different from how others might do it. So talk to me about how perhaps maybe you might go to this country in this way, you might go to this country in another.
When we did an environmental scan of what are the risks, what are the vulnerabilities to really launch a company like Women Care Global, what we recognized is that there's huge competition for subsidization, right? The donor funds are becoming less and less. So we knew we had to use good business practice. And so we go into more developed markets like Mexico City, Puerto Rico, Turkey, the United States, and we generate a modest profit that we then use when we operate at a loss on purpose in Ghana, in Kenya. So it's a hybrid model. We like to call it the Robin Hood approach because it feels good and sounds good, but it is good. It's good business sense. And when people, philanthropists, want to invest in us, they feel good about it too because they know that we are using good business practice, that we can be transparent and show them where the money goes.
Let me ask you about some of the issues that you deal with because each country is unique. Each country is different. There's got to be certain red tape. There's probably corruption that you deal with some countries. And then you've got religious beliefs, you've got cultural, all of these things. It's kind of a stew that you have to navigate. How tough is that?
It's incredibly tough. For example, there are some countries we go in and they say, oh, well, you know, women in Mexico are different than women in Brazil. So you're going to have to do a whole new clinical study. And you say, how could that possibly be? It's the same subset, it's the same age. So sometimes they will put obstacles in front of you just to get you to go away because their religious belief says women shouldn't have access to contraception. So it's very challenging. And when child brides, when you see these poor young girls, they're 13 years old, far too young to have 2 and 3 and 5 children. So it really is about figuring out the covert ways to go through the back door. Maybe you do it through hairstylists. Maybe you're doing it through community schools. But we really figure out other partners to work with that are really well skilled in some of these ways of communication and getting education out. But it's very challenging. And the other quick thing to say is that what's excellent about our expertise is that we bring quality manufacturing and regulatory. Why it matters is there's a lot of counterfeit products out there. Once you finally convince these poor women to do something against their religious beliefs, you want to make darn sure that it's a good product, that they can afford, that they don't have side effects from, because one negative experience, they'll stop using it.
Let me ask you about the one-child policy in China. How do you think that's impacted that country? I mean, it was a temporary measure in 1979. It's been in place for quite a while now. Your thoughts on that?
So I think originally, I really believe the intention was good. I do. I think it was an intent to lift people out of poverty, to really escalate the middle class and increase the middle class. And so I think it set out to do something really good. I think the unfortunate part, the side effect of that was the selection process. You know, there's 50 million males in China. You know, so really doing the male selection was so devastating to women. So I think now, at the end of the day, I'm a little discouraged to say this, but I'm worried that even though things have lightened and I think things will lift, I'm not sure how much good it's going to do because the poorest families couldn't pay the fines anyway. They were still having more children than they were supposed to. So really the sanctions went on people that were more privileged, that could afford it. So I think they're in a place now where, though the intentions and the change, I think, might have always been in the right place, I don't really know that that much progress is going to be made unless they find more programs to really educate and empower the poorest of the poor.
Are you working in China, and are you finding that consumers there are receptive to your message?
We are working in China. We actually have some fantastic manufacturers in China with very high quality products, and we are finding an unbelievably positive reception. Yeah, I actually couldn't be happier about that. We were a little trepidatious to see how it would go, and it's very positive.
Sandra, let me just ask you this. If you were to come back on this program in 5 years from now, what do you think we'll be talking about, and what would you like us to be talking about?
So I would love to come back in 5 years. I would like to be talking about two things. One, I would like to be able to tell you that we are doing very little work in contraceptive choice because the problems have been mostly solved.
You're retired.
I'm retired, exactly. I'm coming back for a totally different reason. But I would like to tell you that the money around things like HIV and the money around nutrition, that things that are equally important, but there was a huge shift that happened. That all of a sudden the wave, the eyes opened to say, oh my goodness, access, true access and the dignity of choice really is the first step for everything else to make sense. And so I would like to tell you that there's not 230 million women that have an unmet need. That's well below 50 million.
But the realist in you suspects you'll be back here in 5 years just as passionate as you are today, or will we make
No,
at
we're going
least
to make
some
progress.
headways?
No, I want to be honest. I really believe this. I really believe that we're going to make measurable progress. I don't think I could get up every day and do Groundhog's Day. I couldn't step into insanity. I just couldn't. I'm too pragmatic for that. So I really believe we're going to make progress. I think it's going to be a 50% difference in 5 years.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have you back in 5 years.
Thank
How's that?
you. Thank
Sandra,
you.
thanks so much for coming in. Really
Thanks for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Yeah, pleasure.
Next, we'll meet an artist who is using her art to take a stand against the harassment of women in public spaces, and she's not being subtle about it. A new street art initiative called Stop Telling Women to Smile has gained popularity for speaking out against street harassment. The project was started by Tatiana Fazlalizadeh as a way to confront her own aggressors. Realizing she wasn't the only woman being victimized, she decided to take a stand by creating portraits of women who had endured harassment in public spaces and sparking conversations about a woman's right to her own space.
If you're not smiling, people automatically think something's wrong with you, and that you need to smile.
You must be girls, right? Oh, no?
And so it's this kind of forced thing where women are being told to smile, to look pretty, to look pleasant. Not for you as the woman, but for me as the asker or the demander, because it'll make me feel better to see you smile. My name is Tatiana Fazlalizadeh, and I am an artist based in Brooklyn, New York. And my project, Stop Telling Women to Smile, is a public art series that addresses gender-based street harassment. I started Stop Telling Women to Smile in late 2012. I was working on a mural at the time, and it just got me thinking about work that's in the public space and how people interact with it and how it affects them, as opposed to work that's in a gallery or in my studio. And so I thought I should do a street art project about street harassment, because street harassment is something that I experience all the time, and it's something that, as an artist, I've wanted to work on for a long time. I just didn't know what medium to really use for it. I was kind of looking at artists who use wheat paste, and it was kind of inspired by them. It felt like the best medium to use as opposed to, spray paint, because I could essentially do my own style, make a drawing, make a painting, spend time on it, have it be very detailed and beautiful, and then simply make a copy of it and put it outdoors. I feel like a lot of people are looking at this project as sort of a response to street harassment. Because when you're outside on the street, sometimes you don't know what to say, or if you should say something, or what you should do. And I feel like this just seems to be a good response, a good way to react for women. And I think that's why a lot of women have made the project so popular. So that is a question I want to pose to you all is, what is harassment to you? Like, when do you feel harassed? And when do you not feel harassed? Because for me, I feel like I know what a compliment is. I don't have to have someone tell me what that is. For me, it's a clear line, but that's me, so maybe it's different for someone else. So what is street harassment to you all?
First of all, I think a compliment is something that you can just clearly just say, "You look very nice today, ma'am." Or, "Wow, you have on something really pretty." Or, even if I am smiling, you can just smile. You don't have to even tell. I think telling somebody to do anything, or, it's like you're intruding in on their own personal space.
It's an intrusion of space for me. That's like the basic level of it.
Right.
Like there's all these other levels, but the base, it's like, I don't know you. You don't know, like, my history with men. Like, maybe I don't feel comfortable with some stranger coming up to me when it's dark at night. And like,
the process involves me sitting and talking with a woman or a group of women. I talk to them about street harassment, what they go through, their experiences, what they've been through, what they want to say about it, how they feel about it. And then kind of turn that way a little bit if you can, and then look at me. Yeah, you look a lot angrier. The process continues after that by me taking their photograph and doing a drawing of them from that photograph. So did you think of something that you might want to say to harassers that could potentially be the text on a poster?
you don't know me, you don't know my story.
Okay. The text that I add to the final posters is either an exact quote from them, or it's something that's inspired by their story or their experience or what they want to say. I get a lot of responses from people that are saying things like, I like to smile, or smiling is good. Everyone should smile. What's wrong with smiling? It's not about smiling. I like to smile too. Everyone smiles. It's about being told to smile, which is a very important part of that message. Stop telling women to smile. It doesn't say stop smiling women. It's stop telling women to smile, because it's something that I feel like happens to a lot of people, and I think that that's because we are looked at as having to be pretty, be pleasant, be likable, be approachable all the time. I put that in the context of street harassment in this series because sometimes when you're told to smile and you don't smile, a man's reaction becomes very punitive. So, oh, you don't want to smile, fine. You know what I mean? And so then you're insulted. And I think that that's harassment, absolutely. this project has plenty of times for me to get discouraged. When people first started defacing these posters, when I first started reading these comments in the comment sections on all these articles, it was like, wow, maybe I'm not doing something good. Maybe this, this is too much. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But then I realized, like, no, you have to be very steadfast in what your beliefs are, and then you just keep going with it, Whatever your idea is, whatever your goal is, whatever you want to say, find a way to say it and get it out there, and then just do it. If you're doing it for yourself in particular, then that'll be enough. And then if people catch on to it, then that's fantastic, and they probably will, because whatever you experience and you go through, tons of other women do too, and they'll probably catch on and appreciate it.
That's it for this week. Join the conversation with us on social media. We are CCTV America on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. All of tonight's interviews can be found online at CCTV America's website. And let us know what you'd like us to take Full Frame next. Email us at fullframe@cctv-america.com. Until then, I'm Mike Wilner in Los Angeles. We'll see you next time.